Hello and welcome to Gaming Mechanics, a podcast featuring myself, Greg, and my good friend Mark.
Hey there.
Hello, Mark. Talking about various different things related to video games, board games, card games, just the idea of gaming in general. This week we will be talking about MOBAs, multiplayer online arena battle games, born from the ashes of the RTS genre, that have since kind of taken over the world of gaming. And Mark, you've been doing some delving and research over the past couple weeks. Want to talk about your MOBA life?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll talk a little bit about my history with MOBAs first. I played League way back when it first came out, when it just came out of beta back in like 2010 when I was in college. And I wouldn't say I ever got very good at the game, but I had some League experience back when people were abbreviating it LOL. That fell out of popularity. But I decided that this last week that I was going to try to kind of break back into that world and just see what was going on and the developments that had occurred and what sorts of things were interesting to talk about. And I was pretty shocked, frankly, by like how skilled people were at the game at pretty much all levels. So when you just make an account in League, your option is to do a quick match. I had a level 30 account, so that probably hurt me a little bit in terms of the skill level I was being matched up with. But right away, my teammates were not very happy with my play. I wasn't making what I thought were any egregious mistakes, but people were, criticizing things that I was doing pretty frequently. I played about 3 or 4 games before I decided that I needed to take a step back and maybe educate myself a little bit about what was going on in the game. But as I continued to think more about what this process was looking like for me, I realized that if I was just somebody who didn't have a few hours to spend getting acquainted with the latest strategies and the new metas and all the new mechanical developments that have happened in League, I'm not sure there would be a place for me to just connect with other players and play casually against things that weren't AI. And so...
And it wasn't just a few hours, right? You spent like a significant amount of time reading, watching videos, listening to podcasts.
I did. Yeah, so afterward, I really kind of went all for it, and I was educating. I tend to jump right into things. So I listened to a few different podcasts. They were excellent. I listened to saw a couple of YouTube videos that were basically just lectures about League strategy. And so and I continued to play a few games and tried to like feel out where is the place for people like me who are bad at the game, basically. I won't sugarcoat it.
Right.
But and it isn't. I don't want this to come across as I'm bad at the game and so I'm complaining. Actually, my point is that there will always be people who want to play a game but just don't have a lot of time to invest in it. And so it's not even that I'm bad at the game, it's that I don't aspire to be very good, but I still want to play.
Yeah. Which is notable for, I think, a couple of reasons. One, just the well-known and infamous League community, and really most MOBAs and online games, but League is notorious for having an unbelievably toxic community just across the board.
Yes, yeah, that really hasn't changed in the last 5 years.
Exactly, is notable. But two, also just, it would be one thing if you were like, talking about, hey, this game, like, I don't know, some like esoteric older game, like trying to get into, I don't know,
Tribes.
Like, yeah, sure. Yeah, or like old, like, oh boy, I can't even think of anything right now.
I mean, StarCraft.
Unreal Tournament, or playing Brood War, or, something like that. And but much less current and the kind of the kings of multiplayer gaming right now, which is very much the MOBAs. The mobile MOBAs. Yeah, no, not quite. I mean, I guess with like Battle Royale Arena and like Overwatch being exceptions, but still I think MOBAs pretty much have the stranglehold on multiplayer games right now.
Right.
Certainly on PC.
Yeah, and I know you play Heroes of the Storm a lot, and it was...
Yes, I'm a Heroes pleb.
It was interesting because as I was listening to these podcasts and people who played League, at a fairly high level, much higher than me, probably Platinum or Diamond, And I repeatedly heard people talk about, in actually multiple different podcasts, that they wanted instead to play Heroes. Or
really?
that, I don't know, I mean, they wouldn't have phrased it like, I'd rather play Heroes, but they conceded that, I didn't play a lot of League this week, I played some Heroes of the Storm, and I'm starting to wonder if it's because there's such a competitive atmosphere around League all the time that people want to go to something that isn't quite so intense. What's your experience been with Heroes of the Storm and competitive or casual play?
Well, I am not just. I mean, so there's one level where I'm just a little bit of a Blizzard fanboy. In that I grew up on Warcraft 3 and StarCraft, and so when Heroes dropped, I thought I might as well try it. And having never played, actually, I was primarily an RTS gamer. Like I said, real time strategy, the StarCraft, Command and Conquer, Total Annihilation genre. And hated MOBAs because they stole my favorite genre from me. Basically, MOBAs were born out of the ashes, like I said, of RTSs.
Yes, you had some venom reserved for MOBAs for a number of years.
I really did for a while there. Yeah, no, it was nasty, and it makes a little bit of sense. I still maintain there's some high deficiencies with the genre, but regardless. I actually do really enjoy it now. But Heroes, I just
we'll do another episode on that.
Yeah, we should. That'll just be me ranting for like 40 minutes, but be less discussion. Anyway, but Heroes is different. I think partially because it's we have League of Legends, then Dota 2 being just the titans of the genre, which just probably carry 90%, if not more, of the entire MOBA player base. So Heroes is smaller by one. So you don't have this massive group of people, and just by the law of large numbers, you're not going to have as many assholes. Right. So that helps. But two, it's also Blizzard went out of their way, as they tend to do, to make it ridiculously accessible. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things got highly simplified. There's no item builds. There's shared EXP for a team. Your individual hero doesn't level. Your whole team levels together.
Right.
You have talents instead of items. There's no gold mechanic. It's only EXP. There's one resource. So in general, I found it to be, one, a lot easier to get into, but two, it was similar. I think just the MOBA genre as a whole, as we were kind of talking about, I have watched probably, I was just talking about this just a few minutes ago before we went on, probably close to 100 hours worth of archive material from a professional commentator, former professional StarCraft 2 and Warcraft 3 player named Grubby, who's fantastic. You should all go listen to him and watch him. He's stupidly positive, very funny, and explains gameplay a lot. He streams Hero like 8 hours a day. He plays a ton of it and is very good at it. He's like number 30 in EU ladder right now, which is pretty darn high. But anyway, I think I've watched roughly 100 hours of him, and he goes out, it's not just him playing, he plays and goes really far out of his way to explain exactly what's happening, what he's doing, both in the draft picks, during the game. He analyzes afterwards. Sometimes he does full replay analysis, which is quite in-depth. He's the real deal, real good. Dutch, he has this fantastic Dutch accent. Nice. But point is that even with Heroes, which is, I would say, orders of magnitude less complex than League, and certainly Dota. Dota kind of is the king there. Mm-hmm. I feel pretty darn comfortable now playing League and being able to draft well and knowing what to do. My mechanics are still a little bit shaky.
You mean Heroes?
I feel like I have yes, with Heroes. I do. Yeah, no. Couldn't touch League with a 10-foot pole. But for exactly the reasons we're talking about. But even with all of that, it still took me like a long time of listening and reading and looking things up to understand not just the gameplay mechanics, but the strategic choices you have to make. Mm-hmm. So similarly, for a while there, I was only playing against, and I think a lot of people just were playing against AI because I had no idea what I was doing with individual players, and I was terrified of disappointing people. The one thing about League, or Heroes, good lord, that it has separate from League is kind of an in-between between quick play and ranked match, which is just called unranked. That still has a barrier to entry in terms of how high a level you have to be as a player and proficiency with certain heroes. That has the same exact format as ranked play in terms of a draft, and then kind of an assumption of competitive picks in terms of heroes and composition, but there's no MMR or ELO associated with it, and there's nothing to be gained really. So that's kind of a safe place to kind of wet your teeth a little bit on the idea of playing competitively, as opposed to just getting murdered in quick match.
I'm sorry, the phrase "wet your teeth." I think usually people either go with cut your
cut your teeth or
whet your appetite. But you know, wet your teeth. That could be a thing.
I mean, what, like a whetting stone, WHET, right? It's like sharpening, right? So
Yeah, there you go.
that's gonna be like sharpening your teeth kind of thing, which sounds horrible.
Yeah,
And
getting
is
ready
equally
to prey on noobs.
yeah, basically. Yeah, it's a very, very predatory explanation, or predatory thing.
Well, on the topic of
Anyway.
AI gameplay, I think that there in League too, there's this sort of implicit like, well, if you're bad, you should play against computers, and I think it's just the way that it's set up right now is really deficient because
Yeah.
you just don't learn that much playing against AI, and it's not even clear what you're
Oh, no,
supposed to be learning. Like you could
Yeah.
you could grind out IP because now in League you've got to have 16 champions unlocked before you can participate in ranked matches, which I was thinking that like that actually might be a place for me to go to play less skilled players. Right, because I'm playing quick match.
theory.
I'm getting people who, by my really ignorant estimation, I would put in silver or gold tier, and I'm probably bronze, or if there was something below that, I would be that.
Wood, I believe is the common term.
The wood tier.
Yeah, wood
and
tier.
so I was like, maybe I can get into ranked, and I'll play people who are at my skill level. But I can't even play ranked until after I unlock 16 champions. And so it's like I can sit here and grind out AI matches, and now I know what mechanics I would need to work on. But again, that's because I took a lot of initiative to figure that out. And and it doesn't. I used a word earlier, which I think describes it perfectly, which is it's not very approachable.
Yeah,
It is
exactly.
really convoluted to know even what skills am I developing playing these computers over and over and over again. Because you can beat a computer and suck at the game. Like, just be really bad.
Oh, easy.
Not know anything about, like, lane positioning or knowing that CS is really important or what items to buy. Like, and if you're just grinding against computers, like, what's the point of that for the player base? Like,
Totally.
that's a really weird barrier for them to put in if they're not going to use that time where you're just constantly playing computers to instruct you about how to play the game.
Right. And the other thing is, like, there's some level of having people in a perfect world. Like, think about, like, I'll just open up the comparison to real world sports, at least.
Yeah, we're going
other games.
anyway.
Yeah. But in theory, the other thing with just any online game is the anonymity there, and the lack of actual direct communication / faces, right? And in theory, if you're learning a new sport or a new game or a new kind of anything, there's going to be some level of getting taught it by the people you're playing it with. If you sign up for, suit like a co-ed soccer league, community driven, and don't even know how to play soccer, obviously that's not the best, but you'd have a whole team of people that would tell you kind of what to do and how to make it work.
Right.
That is unbelievably rare online. If not, I don't think that happens, just period, where you have people trying to teach you how to play the game.
Yeah, actually, I have an experience related to this that happened yesterday, where I was, again, trying to find my place in the League world, and was basically had settled for slumming it against some AI for a bit, and so did some AI co-op, and there was a mid laner on our team who was clearly just like, maybe this was the first time he'd ever turned the game on, was like incredibly bad. And he was like 5 levels behind. He didn't realize he needed to be up near the creeps so that he could get XP. And so he just ended up really under level. And he like stayed right under the tower so that he had like the tower helping him out. And so like, I understood kind of his thought process, but I wanted to sort of reach out and explain to him like, hey, so I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I'm just trying to help you out. Like, you should go hang up by the creeps so that you can get experience, because if you're under level, you're never going to win these. He kept engaging the other mid laner and tried to attack him and kill him, and it wasn't working.
Right.
I mean,
It just didn't work.
As stupid as bots are, if they're 5 levels ahead of you, like you're not going to win that fight.
Oh yeah, it was good.
And so. So I just sent him a chat message, and he never responded. I don't even know if he spoke English, or maybe he was a real young kid. But it struck me as really odd when I was doing that, because I was like, this feels like I've never done this before. This feels weird, and I'm learning a lot about the game, and I have some knowledge to pass on. But it does feel like counter to what you're quote unquote supposed to be doing in the game. Like, there's not much space for you to be instructing or improving another teammate's game.
Yeah, and that's just a social thing too. Like, I mean, I've tried that sometimes in Heroes, and very, very rarely does it go well. You can be as careful as you want with the type of language you use. Obviously very gentle,
Right.
Very unassuming, with very helpful. And sometimes it does work immensely. But for me, it's been a very, very high rarity, particularly if you're playing quick match. Mm-hmm. It's this weird double standard where like people get pissed at you if you don't play well, but then if you try to like critique them at all, they're like, dude, it's just quick match. Like you should, who gives like no one needs like your advice here. I think I've been said those exact phrases before, where I've been doing something technically correct, right? And he's like, dude, come over here and do this. And I'm like, no, I'm soaking XP. Like, this is necessary. We're down a tier, and if we engage right now, we're going to lose. And he's like, no one needs your XP. And I was like, I don't even know how to start arguing with that. Like, it's not, what? And I don't know. So it's a very bizarre double standard. Like I said, I think that's partially the weird kind of like social isolation dynamic where you just don't do that in real life in such an aggressive way, and you tend to respond a lot better.
Right.
Obviously, these are all generalities. You have bad apples on both sides. But yeah, again, like if in soccer you were trying to do that, very rarely would you be met with absolute scorn and then like like just being cold shouldered for the rest of the game. Like someone's probably going to hear that and try to respond.
Right. No, that's a great point. Like, and part of that I'm sure is the face-to-face contact, and just having more of a sense of being a team. I think. Than there is when you sort of just get randomly thrown into these pickup games. I mean, maybe if you were just playing a pickup game soccer where you just showed up, there was a field somewhere where there was always a soccer game going on, and you just showed up there and you started playing. You might encounter some similar dynamics where people are
potentially
very intense. The same group of experts show up every Friday night, and you show up on Friday night.
That have queued together and just trash people.
Exactly, and you're like, you get, you're with them, and they're just yelling at you constantly. And I mean, I guess I could see that happening, but it's much more prevalent with the way that the internet gaming infrastructure is set up.
Right. So I want to go back,
because it is all the time.
I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier, which was the fact that you pointed out that in quick match, you can play with anyone. Like GM, right? Grandmaster. I don't know what the league ranking is, but for Blizzard games, tends to be like Masters and Grandmasters, the very, very top of those tiers, like Diamond, Masters, Grandmasters, and those guys can queue for QM whenever they want and just play with any person. So there's no QM tries to, at least in Heroes, tries to give as much credence to just making a decent hero composition, so getting like 3 damage dealers, a support, and a tank, basically, as opposed to trying to make sure it matches well. So it's very interesting that, so you have that mode where it literally anyone can come and just dumpster you. And then you have ranked, which you're right for yourself after your placement matches, which will probably be rather painful. You'll then be playing with a bunch of other bronze players. And then they'll actually be playing with people of your skill level. What do you think of that? Like, is there a way around that? Because people are naturally intimidated just by the phrase ranked or the idea of placement matches suddenly getting measured. They want to be able to practice first and get good. At least in some way, and there's no place to do that, period. I guess there's like tutorials and game tutorials that can explain stuff, but there's just nothing compared to actually playing matches, with people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, you have to be willing to lose and to be bad at the game. And I think that actually ties into this, I don't know, there's almost like a stigma, I think, with a lot of these really competitive games of being bad.
For sure.
And almost the
phrase noob exists for a reason.
Well, yeah, but there's also this sort of it's implied that if you're bad, it's because you aren't good at the game and you wish you were better, right? So like that's very much in the culture. Like, you're bad, you don't want to be bad, and of course, I don't want to be bad at League. But I also, it's a trade-off, right? I could be good at League, but I'd be investing more time. And so,
right, exactly. You don't.
There's no sort of.
You don't care about being.
Yeah, there's no sort of nuance in the way that we talk about skill level, where it's, this person plays League once a week for a couple of hours. Yeah. So they're not going to be bronze tier, silver tier, or whatever. They're just going to be a casual player, and that is, I think, met with a certain amount of stigma because these two ideas are conflated, of like how good you are and how good you want to be. And I think that's actually one of the bones I have to pick with the way that every popular game does its ranking system. because everybody's on the same track, and it's sort of like everybody's on the same inevitable progression toward diamond or platinum or challenger tier is what it's called in League. Grandmaster. And so it's sort of like everybody's trying to climb this ladder, everybody's trying to get to the top. And that's why I would love to, my proposal for dealing with this sort of a dynamic would be to have some sort of what is equivalent to a local sports league, where you can climb to the top of a very short ladder, essentially. Like it's not a big deal. Nobody thinks that you're awesome because you won, your intramural soccer league. But it still gives you something to strive for. You can get a little better with the amount of time you want to invest. Sure. And there's not this looming sense of like, if I invest 8 hours a day for the next year, maybe I'll be somebody.
Yeah, I'll break into plat, yeah.
Right, because I'm like, I don't even want to do that, but I would love to compete with people and play League.
Yeah, and play well. I mean, I think, what would you say to the argument that like, leveling within a league would like leveling up through bronze, right? Going from like bronze 5 to bronze 1 or whatever. Is that a similar effect, do you think, or not, because it's still within the entire like, hierarchy of then you had silver and so on and so forth? 'Cause it's all part of that, like you said, that stream, that kind of mountain that you're climbing. Yeah.
I mean, there is. I think that goes into some of what I'm talking about. Like that's helpful. And it's, if people can sort of socially reframe this idea of, well, everybody who's in bronze would like to be in silver, I think that would help. But I also would contend that like there aren't championships for bronze. There isn't a tournament. There's not a clear winner of bronze. Like you can get better at bronze, or you can fall down.
Yeah, the only reason to level through bronze is to get out of bronze, right? It's not the point. Like you're not trying to stay there, or
And so
that's an important distinction.
It's sort of like you level to until like you can't go up anymore, and that's just sort of where you sit. And so there isn't necessarily a sense of like, I did better than the other people in the league this year. Maybe next year I'll have another good year, or this year I had a bad year. Maybe next season, I'll improve. But I don't necessarily want to be with a bunch of people who are even better than this. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not my goal is to continually do that.
Right.
So here's a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Like my goal isn't to invest more and more and more time into this. I'm happy with the amount of time that I'm investing, but I do want to compete against people. Yeah,
exactly. It's like you said, the good equivalent being the real world soccer league, where you're like, my goal is not to get better to the point where I can go try out for like a club team, and then I'll be able to go try out for like a semi-pro team, and then eventually end up in a professional league. That's not the goal, right? Like,
right.
When you're playing club soccer, it's like, hey, I'm very happy with my current soccer skill. Of course, I want to get better. Like, of course, I want to be able to play well, but I'm not looking to, this is something I'm doing for fun, and with other people who want to be doing it for fun. And we all show up with that assumption. We all show up knowing that that's what we're looking for, and that's this 4 to 5 hour a week, if that, time expenditure, and why is that different?
Well, on that,
so I have some ideas about why it's different, but go ahead.
Well, I would love to hear what you have to say about why it's different. But a quick note about even the stigma associated with the rankings. Like, I would never talk to somebody, find out they're in a local soccer league, and think to myself, "Oh, you're bad at soccer."
But if
I talk to somebody and I find out they're in the bronze tier league, like the clear implication is like, you're not very good at this game.
Yeah, and I have nothing to gain from talking to you or experience. You are to be pitied, and like you are a subclass of league player.
Right, you're a casual, filthy casual soccer player. Like it just
exactly. No one says that. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh yeah, how dare you go play a sport for fun? Like similar with the game. Interesting. Well, so I transition here into talking about like why I think that is to some degree, but even past that, then come up against the despite everything we're saying and our confusions, the elephant in the room being that in gaming as a whole and on Twitch, League and Dota are by far the most popular games.
Yeah.
Period, for people to watch, for them to play. Everything that we're talking about in terms of the high level of barrier, the social stigma, the difficulty in actually learning, certainly the the
the
toxicity,
trolling, yeah, the toxicity,
have done nothing to deter people from playing and watching and being part of the community, it seems. And obviously that's a bigger discussion of like, just the internet and how friggin' weird it is, and people, gravitating toward 4chan exists and is thriving, and that's a problem in itself. But we won't go into that too much. But it does appear to be doing something right, and this is what the people seem to want. So that's interesting. Going back for a second to why the potential is, just again going with kind of the simple and potentially oversimplified comparison between soccer and an esport, like LOL. Again, just the you were mentioning this, Mark, so I want to take credit for it. But when you go into, if someone has never played soccer before, and you come in and you are trying to, what the first thing that you do in soccer is you explain to them the rules, right? Can only use your feet, trying to get the ball into the goal. 9 people on each side. The goalie can use it. We start with the kickoff. Don't get out of bounds. The person who touched it last. All of the really basic soccer rules. Could explain it in 2 minutes tops. Try to do that with a MOBA. Like seriously, just try to even by yourself try to explain to someone who has never played before, and I don't even know where to begin, honestly.
Right.
Two. The fact that you point out, you can't if you break a rule in soccer. It's a penalty. Penalties exist if you break. There's the potential for you to do that. In a game that's coded, you can't cheat in LoL, right? I mean, you can like hacks and whatnot, but like you have to go way the frick out of your way to do that. You can't accidentally cheat, like you can in soccer or sport.
Right. Yeah, you can't just reach down and touch the ball with your hand, metaphorically.
Exactly. And that I think that actually has a big component to it, because that suddenly you're not thinking about the rules of gameplay. Suddenly you're immediately thinking about high level strategy. Right, the idea of team compositions, where to be, timings, item management, last hitting, EXP and gold management, all that jazz. And it's immediate, right? It's not like, okay, learn these things, then learn these things, then learn these things. Obviously, that's the ideal way to learn and to teach. But certainly in the game, again, we're just talking about someone who's showing up and wants to play League of Legends. They've heard it's a really popular game. They've seen it at the top of Twitch. Obviously, if you know about Twitch, you probably have heard of League before too. But in this scenario, just someone who's wants to play a really popular game that seems to be really fun because everyone loves it, similar to soccer. It's categorically different, right, in terms of how. And of course, there's tutorial, and Riot has done a great deal of trying to streamline the learning process, and I think they've done decently at it. But it's still just like it's a labyrinth.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of so they do have this sort of onboarding tutorial. I haven't in Riot's defense, I haven't gone through that for years. Maybe it's very different than it used to be.
I mean, I did it like 2 years ago or so, and it gives you real bare bones, like right click to move your hero, right, and like hero abilities and ults, and the goal is to destroy the enemy core.
Yeah, and so those are important things to teach people for
sure. But doing that and jumping into quick play, you immediately that's not enough, right?
You'd be destroyed.
Exactly.
By your own team and by the other team. Exactly.
Yeah, precisely. So that's I think that would definitely play into the reasoning for why it's so much more difficult. Certainly the complexity, the fact that it's just, for video games actually very old. League released in 2009 technically. It's a very different beast from there, as well as the fact that it continually added and iterated upon as opposed to soccer. You don't have new rules for soccer. I mean, you have FIFA, but that's like something a little bit different. You don't have continually new rules for soccer, right? You don't have suddenly new positions that you get to introduce.
Right.
Or like suddenly you're playing with multiple golds.
There isn't much of an evolving meta for soccer. There's a pretty clearly established way to play and counterplay.
Exactly. As opposed to League. So anyway.
Well, this distinction between like learning the rules and learning the strategy, I think, does make it less approachable, because you kind of get thrown into the deep end of like, I could learn so much strategy about every little thing that I'm doing has strategic implications, because it does. I mean, with any game, every move you make matters. But I think that can be overwhelming for new players. You mentioned the age of League, though. I would love to talk about how this topic applies to games that are much younger. So do you want to talk a little bit about the Overwatch community and entry barrier?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. So that's the other thing I have decent experience with, being Overwatch, which is a very fun game. But it was interesting to me, as we were talking beforehand, again, like the problems you were talking about, where it's not only is it hard to obviously get into League, but it's actually just really hard to get in and play a game and have fun with it, right? There's so much that you have to do even before you're having fun.
Right.
Much less beginning to understand and play well, which those two are kind of interlinked too, right? Like in theory, especially in quick play.
Oh, absolutely.
With Overwatch, it's that game. Just I think it's currently running its first anniversary, so it's roughly a year old, almost exactly. Come to think of it, so very very young game. Still very young competitive scene. I mean, they didn't even have a agreed upon competitive game type. They're still iterating on the way to play competitive. Like I don't know, 8 months ago. That's when that got set. I mean, competitive Overwatch is super super young. But even past that, we have just again a little bit of apples to oranges here in terms of a multiplayer FPS versus a MOBA, but it's still a very similar kind of arena based. Bite-sized, you play repetitive games. It's has a lot to do with individual hero composition, abilities based. It's very similar to Team Fortress 2 in that regard. Obviously, that's kind of the comparison people make. But with Overwatch, you can actually, in large part, jump into a quick play match knowing very, very little. Again, you have to learn the basics, right? The different types of maps you're trying to capture this, escort the payload. There's no, straight up deathmatch mode, as well as just learn basic hero stuff, right? Like, hey, this hero, Lucio, is a healer, and he heals in an AoE effect. And he has a really weak left click, main shot, and then a right one that boops people and moves them around. And that's Lucio, right? But past that, you actually can know very little about the game, and get in and... Certainly in terms of like we were talking about strategic analysis or team comp, to a certain extent, right? If everyone goes like Sombra, Genji, Hanzo, Bastion, Torbjorn, Widowmaker, you're going to get rolled and no one's going to have fun. But past that, as long as you have like some semblance of normal... And if the other team does a comp like that, you might actually have some fun because like you both suck. Anyway, point is with Overwatch, I just noted it being very different in that... It has this very, still has a high competitive scene and has the ranked gameplay. But in quick match, you can get in and play not too hot. And of course, there's still, like I said, flaming and people calling you out. But you can really get in there and play kind of whoever and have a darn good time. You can play for an hour to an hour and a half, just one night. Like I said, maybe a minimal investment of like a couple to 3 hours learning the game, and suddenly you're good. As opposed to, the dozens of hours of both gameplay, learning, wiki reading, of learning a MOBA. So that was very interesting to me to think about.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just tied to the FPS genre in terms of the mechanics are slightly easier. Maybe it's tied to the fact it's a lot harder. You can't see how other people are doing in Overwatch nearly as easy as you can in League or HOTS.
That's true.
You can only see how you're doing, which is important. Or maybe, like you're talking about, it's just it's a very young community and game. Maybe 6 years on, we'll see the same thing with Overwatch.
Yeah, you mentioned like the idea you could invest 2 hours and you'd be good.
Yeah, roughly. I think it's not horribly unfair.
I think what you mean by that is you'd be good enough. You'd be good enough to play a quick match and just enjoy the game. And I do wonder if that good enough is a moving target as the average player gets better over time.
Sure.
That's just conjecture. Like I don't know if that's gonna be the case in 5 years with Overwatch. I do remember playing Counter-Strike after it was about 6 years old and just getting rolled continually. Because anybody who is still playing Counter-Strike Source after 6 or 7 years is very good at the game, and you will die all the time.
Immediately.
And that's a very simple mechanic. There's the store, and you've got to pick what guns to buy. But I wasn't anywhere near that. I was just trying to master mechanics, like point and shoot. But people have got like spread patterns memorized.
I mean, like it's on that level.
Completely destroyed. And so I would say the entry barrier to Counter-Strike Source became incredibly prohibitive to people who were trying to become a part of the game, that community.
Right. And I think that's definitely true. Like I said, for games like, if anyone's still playing, well, Brood War is not even the best example, but even more esoteric games like Command and Conquer 3 or something. The only people left on those ladders are just gonna. I mean, they don't have ladders anymore. It's on GameSpy. GameSpy. Yeah, no, I think so. No, yeah, it was powered by GameSpy and got shut down. Basically having independent ladders or other old RTS games like Battle for Middle Earth or again going back to like Total Annihilation or or Planetary Annihilation now, even though it's a semi-young game. The only people playing those games are going to be stupidly good at it and just murder you.
Right.
The slight difference in the MOBA genre now is like you're talking about that guy, right, who was like 5 levels behind and just still absolutely sucked. And so you still have players like that, even with League, 8 years in. I think the difference being that the culture has shifted to the point where that guy, even if he still exists, it's not just you have players that are just going to roll everyone, but that the culture has shifted to the point where that is no longer acceptable in the least. Right? In Overwatch, that's still like I don't feel horrible about that when I see someone who just doesn't know the game. Partially because, like I said, it's young. Partially, I try to be as kind as possible to every human I interact with, be it online or otherwise. And I know Overwatch pulls a lot of younger kids because it's so cartoony and kind of family friendly. Exactly.
Right, and simple.
It's dynamic.
In terms of it's
but even past that, there's an interesting question, like you said, that moving target potentially, if in 5-6 years, that kind of assumed goodwill will have disappeared, or at least shifted significantly, where now instead of seeing someone pick Sombra and getting murdered every time and feeling frustration and maybe not saying anything, that will no longer become acceptable and you will just get flamed until you switch or stop playing entirely. I don't know if that's true.
The community sort of loses patience for new players.
Makes sense to me, just intuitively.
Hypothesis.
And I'll be curious to see if that continues with games or if that is a kind of uniquely MOBA-centered dynamic, with kind of the rise of esports and Twitch as a platform and, I think Heroes got broadcast on ESPN2 at one point,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that sort of thing, just becoming more and more. I wonder if kind of the seeds of that the bigger and more coverage it has and the more, quote unquote, open it becomes, if that sort of toxicity will become less and less just because socially we're altruistic creatures in general and humans tend towards cooperation and social cohesion. So I wonder if part of the reason for that toxicity was because back in the day, if you were playing League or Dota, the only people who knew about it was this really cloistered internet culture that, like I said, definitely tends towards some toxicity. Had a lot of other words in mind that I censored myself for. And now, as it's becoming more and more accessible to for lack of a better term, and I identify as this, so don't take it as pejorative, but like kind of the gamer nerd stereotype of more socially awkward potentially, as it opens up to more and more people, that the base will be less those people who are going to be toxic and kind of generally elitist,
right?
In their attitude.
Yeah,
I wonder. I don't know.
I'm curious about that too.
I would love to see that. That's why I love watching Grubby. He's so positive. Day 9, same thing.
In order for esports to really, I think, take their place alongside games like soccer, which we've been drawing comparison with this whole time, I think that needs to be the case where there isn't this elitism. If you don't get in on a game in the first 2 or 3 years, it's sort of like, well, you're never going to catch up. Like
totally. Oh, tops.
You're just sort of
kind even.
Yeah, then that is. That's a pretty big window. It might even be after the first year. And
it depends on the game, right?
Right,
yeah,
and how
I'd say 2-3
competitive it is, and when it gets big, like League, and nobody played League the first year. I mean, it was tiny, but once it got big, it was like you were just sort of perpetually behind. It was almost too late because the community wouldn't tolerate new people, like we've been talking about. So
right, exactly.
I'm curious if that's a real phenomenon, or if it's just there's other things at play here. But I think regardless, if these games become fixtures of competitive digital life, I think they need to address this problem of high entry barrier.
That was built into the game's DNA from the start in terms of its design, right? That was not. I don't think anyone necessarily expected this to blow up to the phenomenon it was. So if you were going, and that's kind of what Blizzard did in some ways with Heroes, was they were trying to build a new MOBA from the ground up and address the MOBA genre, as opposed to League or certainly the original Dota, and Dota 2 obviously shares massive roots with that. Or here's New Earth, Demigod. We talked about those I think last time a little bit. That didn't succeed. Those games were not attempting to define the MOBA genre necessarily, or make up for some of its short-sightedness or lack thereof. They were just trying to build a game. They weren't trying to make sure that it had a small barrier for entry because they didn't need to. People were going to play it or they weren't. Yeah. Now, when these suddenly become a phenomena culturally and people want to play League because it's the biggest game, suddenly that original design, which it was not designed with, that intent, becomes quite a hindrance. Mm-hmm. Which I think, like I said, potentially is why Heroes feels a little bit more gentle, is because Blizzard did actually design it from the ground up to be more accessible.
Right, with some of the foresight, or I guess hindsight from
exactly, which,
community evolved.
To be fair, they couldn't have known because they had no idea how it was going to pan out necessarily. Yeah, exactly. And now by this point, it is hardwired into to try to, like, I don't even know how to begin thinking about making it more accessible, right? Because the game is so well defined and there's no way to change it in terms of its its bones, its DNA. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, obviously there's communities that pop up for coaching, but maybe some even in client thing of a place for people to go to get help. You have people sign up to be coaches and help people out when they come on, and you can go into a room and get assigned a coach. Obviously that's pretty high commitment there, but something in that regard where you have a systemized place in client to actually teach people the game and bring them in,
right?
And have like-minded people outside of just the tutorial and then going right into QM.
It seems weird to talk about in-person coaches for video games, but I wonder if it will be weird in 15 years because, when I think about my experience...
Standard for normal sports.
Exactly. Like, we wouldn't say, oh, it's too extreme to send our kid to a soccer coach to teach him how to play soccer, even though soccer is a relatively simple game. I mean, compared to these very strategically deep, MOBAs...
Right.
It's relatively straightforward to at least explain the rules to a person.
Totally. And you have coaches at all levels too.
Yeah, exactly.
Except maybe that really, low-key like pickup that we talk about. But like, it's not weird to have a middle school soccer coach. Actually, that's totally normal. It's like, I wonder if it'd be not weird to have like, a quick match coach that, someone who doesn't want to play as much but loves coaching people and helping them. Mm-hmm. And comes on, and you have a group of people that you make friends with, and obviously that can happen organically now. But it's less. It's that structure isn't there by any means.
Right.
It's a really interesting idea.
And like I said, if these games are serious about taking their place at the sports table as esports,
right.
I think that they should expect to have middle schoolers want to join a league team. Like, if that's where this is going,
totally.
If it's going to be on ESPN, if it's going to be like a real sport, then let's put the infrastructure that we have around real sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And again, not to wax slightly philosophical, but I love games so much, partially just because they're fun and I've been playing them my whole life, and but also, I mean, seriously, like, to like I said, get a little bit cheesy here, but like, the reason I think that esports is exciting, at least to me, outside of just it's like and just gaming in general is like it's connection, right? Like, it exists for people to be doing things together, and that's the reason that we've seen sport as far back as humankind, honestly. In various degrees, we've always had gaming, which is fascinating because in terms of, you talk about the evolutionary like reason for that, there's no direct survival. At least direct.
Right, it's superfluous.
Mechanic to it, right. I mean, it social cohesion, right, and that ability being there is important. But like, just straight up, there's no survival advantage there. Mm-hmm. And yet it just permeated human culture, and it's so important, and it's so cool to see people come together, like, for games. I don't know if you've ever gotten to get the experience of getting to play on a team of any type of game, be it sport, board game, anything, where your team really clicks and you get to do something together and you execute it really well. Like, that feeling is like equivalent. I'm also a musician. I play a lot of music, to getting to play like to syncing up really well with fellow musicians and play something beautiful. Like, it's good. Like, it's important, and it's the human dynamic there. And again, like, so this is kind of highbrow. Obviously, it's business as well. But like, if video games, I think video games have immense potential for this. Immense. Mm-hmm. And if we want to see them succeed in that way, that actually kind of fosters this like connective tissue, then bringing in these things that actually sow towards that, and not necessarily, and obviously, like I said, it's not the simple or innocent, right. But being able to sow towards that thing that brings people together and connects them and fosters communication and success and overcoming and challenge and learning. Which I really think games are all about, and the reason that people love them, putting systems in to actually foster that, as opposed to necessarily competition and earning.
Right.
progression, which is all that there is right now, I think is the key to actually making them a sport.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree with you. I think that there has been a lot of focus recently on making the competitive side viable. So I think
Yeah.
I think that's sensible. A lot of just normal ground physical sports went that way. Football started largely in colleges. As
Right. Right.
matches between colleges, and so you got to start somewhere that's actually going to bring in money and make it an industry. So I understand
Mm-hmm.
that, but
Oh, totally.
I think that now it's time for the industry to start moving toward this longer view of how they're
Yeah.
going to treat the player base and how they're going to get
Mm-hmm.
more people involved with this thing that they've worked so hard to create.
Yeah. I really do believe that's going to be the difference. Honestly, like I said, it might be rather rather naive, but in terms of the next step of actually turning it into something that isn't just this weird kind of, and of course there's all the stigma of video games and culture too to
Yeah.
overcome. I'm not pretending that's so simple. We just get together and sing Kumbaya and suddenly that goes away. But I do think in terms of the difference of a player base and a community where it's not just all these frustrations that you talk about, obviously, and the massive high barrier to entry, that sort of thing, I think is going to be the difference to it actually becoming a more normal staple of life and not just a very, very fringe thing.
Well, let's take just a few minutes to talk about why Dota and League are so popular, given the high entry barrier we've been discussing. What do you think it is that
Yeah,
draws
sure.
people toward these games?
So I've thought about that a decent amount, and like I said, I've played games my whole life and was really involved in the RTS scene in the mid 2000s, which I did a lot of forum browse. I was quite into it, quite nerdy. And so obviously when I started, looking into esports and whatnot, League and Dota were at the top of it on Twitch, and I started watching, and just I couldn't care less. I was so nonplussed, so unimpressed.
Uh-huh.
So that obviously I'm also tend to be kind of curious, and so it got me thinking, like, why, when you see people draw, like, obviously the big League tournaments draw up to like 200K viewers
Yeah.
live, which is insane. That's more than some TV shows. And single streamers pulling 40 to 50,000 people at once, which is just obscene and just so far above anything else. Minus maybe like some Hearthstone streamers maybe can
Yeah.
get, like Crypt can get in
Have
the
to be
like tens
real
of thousands, but like not too much else. Anyway, point is, the answer to that question is I'm not entirely sure. Honestly, I think the story of League and Dota is really interesting, and that League was an obscure game that was not a standout game for the first, like 4 years of its life, I think. I don't think it really started taking off till like 2011 or so.
Yeah, it took them a little
And that's
bit
not
for
4 years,
them
maybe
to
a
tune
little bit
in
longer than that even.
the free-to-play model and everything.
Yeah, sure. Maybe that was part of it, a big part. But in terms of like watching MOBAs is not too easy or fun if you don't know anything. Even if you do know something about it, again, spend that extra hour reading up about it.
Hmm.
You still can't watch a MOBA match, in my opinion. Like, and with any level of knowing what's going on or who's doing well and why they're doing well. Even the most skilled commentators can't make up for that. Even the best replay UI can't make up for that.
And there's so many important things happening at different places on the map. I mean, in a game
Oh,
like
yeah, exactly.
football, the important things are going to follow the ball. I mean,
In large part. Yeah,
I
in
know
large
that
part,
there's
yeah.
other developments happening on the field, but if the camera is just had a focus on the ball the whole time, it wouldn't
Yep.
be bad. Like you'd be
Yep.
able to watch the game and enjoy it. But
Yep, same thing with soccer,
in League, there's so many important things happening in three completely different areas on the map.
Yeah, exactly.
At
Yep,
least.
simultaneously. Yep. No, totally. And that's confusing to me. So in terms of why they're so popular, I got to imagine a big part of it is the community that built around them. It's not just about watching the game. It's kind of more of a lifestyle thing for a lot of people. The pretty extreme internet culture.
Hmm.
I wonder, like I said, if it kind of it's kind of this current, like if all these games just dropped right now and no one knew anything about them, I doubt they would be as popular as they are now, right? Like there's some like kind of the development of the games and the seed of them that goes back years, that took time to build. And like I said, if they dropped now, they wouldn't have the same following.
Yeah, the network effect of the game's popularity, basically. Like,
Yeah, sure.
all my friends play League, so I'm gonna play League.
Yeah, totally. It kind of becomes self-perpetuating in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, like like you said, the amount of production value that can go into it, just because of the amount of money that gets pumped into it. It feels like it's big because it's big, kind of, So tracing that back to where, that'd be a fascinating piece of research, and I'm sure that's been done. I'm sure people have written about that, but in terms of its enduring popularity, I think it's largely that would be my guess. What do you think? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder
or how
if
they maintain a player base.
There's an aspect of the prestige that actually bolsters what is otherwise a normal network effect.
Sure.
Where it's not just, though this game is big and so my friends play it, so I want to play it, but also if I'm really going to test my gaming mettle, I need to play a game that has a large player base, and so that I can really go up against the best of the best and compete with players from all over the world. And League is one of the few platforms where you can do that. I mean, there are other international games where you will end up playing people from around the world if you get really involved in CS:GO or something like that. But I wonder if part of the attraction to it is this elitism in a way.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to be part of this exclusive club of people who are in Diamond or Challenger tier, and I'm going to beat everybody else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the same. It's more. I went to college for psychology. I was a psych major, so I see social dynamics all over the place. But that's exactly right. I mean, it's the same thing in terms of basically a groupthink mechanic, and just desire to be part of something that is bigger than yourself, at the most basic levels. But also, like, I mean, you even see like that with MMOs, right? You have World of Warcraft being, good lord, when did that game launch? Like 2007? It's at least a decade old now. I think 2006 actually is when that dropped. Anyway, so very old game, and being, I've probably this subscribers, my guess would be in the between 2004. Oh my gosh,
November 23rd.
That is insane. Anyway, point is, that game's real old and has by and far the biggest player base. I think the other ones that are close are Final Fantasy and maybe the Elder Scrolls, maybe Guild Wars 2, all in the 1 million or 2 million range, and WoW is in the 6 to 7 to 8 range. I think so. That's just obviously orders of magnitude larger, and I wonder if part of that too is the dead game effect, right? Like the lull dead game, when like things drop at all across the board. People call Destiny a dead game, and so on and so forth. People don't want to be.
People are calling StarCraft 2 a dead game.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, very much. And you can always get a game on there. The standard for dead game in internet culture is quite high, it appears, or low, depending on how you think about it. But anyway, point is, people want to be a part of the biggest, hottest thing. That's not, and no one will ever be able to claim that LoL or Dota are dead games at this point.
Right.
So I think perception's a huge part of it. And yet there also has to be something inherent to it that keeps you around, that makes you stick around. If it was just a bad game, all the social dynamics in the world wouldn't be able to make up for the fact that it's just a crappy game and you won't be able to hold. So there's obviously things that are just innately really good about it.
Yeah, and I can't speak from this vantage point, but I wonder if once you acquire a reasonable amount of skill at the game and you ascend to the mid-ladder rankings, it becomes an enjoyable experience where you play with other people and you have some of the moments you're describing where you feel like you're in sync with your teammates, and it really is a fun thing to participate in.
Yeah.
I don't deny that could really happen. I'm mostly talking about on the very front end of getting into the game. That's mostly what I've been criticizing, because I just don't have enough experience to speak to sort of the mid-tier, what that's like.
Yeah, totally. And the only game I played competitive Command and Conquer, which was not a huge community, but that's been, and then I guess I've played some ranked Overwatch, where I am a solidly ranked gold member of the Pantheon, which is super low. I mean, it's above silver and bronze, I guess, but not too great. Point being, and I will. When you have those experiences where your team comes together and clicks, it feels like $100. It's fantastic. I have not had that experience on Heroes yet, but that might just be game complexity too. It's harder to make that happen with MOBA than it is with Overwatch because of its simplicity.
Right. Okay, well, those are some things to ponder. I think it's a good place for us to stop for today.
I think
if you want to hear more from me or Greg, you can find us at Gaming Mechanics on Twitter. And we will see you next time.
Sounds good. All right, man. Take it easy.
If you enjoyed this episode of Gaming Mechanics, check out our Twitter at Gaming Mechanics, or our Facebook page by going to facebook.com/gamingmechanics. Thanks for joining us.